Well, I want to welcome you back to the Seriously Don't Do That podcast. Thank you for joining us from wherever and whenever you're joining us. Today, we're talking about the U.S. entry trap and assuming it's just bigger and works like home. Geir's actually lived it, including the reset, and I've had the opportunity to talk with Geir on a number of levels. I would say this is not the first time we appeared together. We were actually fortunate to be on a panel with our Norwegian trade delegation a couple of months ago. And in preparing for that and even doing that, I, at that time, said, I want to have Geir on the Seriously Don't Do That podcast, because I think that what he will share is going to be very helpful to our audience. And he's done it. He's been very successful, been very impressed with what he's put together at Dossier. So, Geir, for folks meeting you the first time, what are you building and who do you help?
Okay, Dan. Thank you for having me, and fun to appear again after we met in Minneapolis.
Yes.
So I'm Geir Arnhoff, or Geir Arnhoff. My company, Dossier, we help hospitals to make sure that staff is properly trained for the tasks they should do. And at scale, that basically means hospitals are facing tremendous issues and financial hardship, and hospitals in the US running red numbers or hardly profitable if they are. Same thing in Europe. Some hospitals are fighting for avoiding bankruptcy and all that. So it's an important thing to make sure that they are really well trained to ensure that people feel confident what they're doing. But of course, like we need, and we are digitizing. We're digitizing everything that goes around training, learning, to make sure that goes more smooth. They spend less time on the paperwork and they do the appropriate training. And at the end of the day, more patient safety and better operational efficiency, which is unfortunately the only way we can get back to black numbers and sustainable healthcare. So the end goal is sustainable healthcare around the world, and that's our bigger mission to contribute to.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've been working with hospitals in the U.S. market for, I hate to admit it, but maybe close to 30 years. I'll say since I had a full head of hair, which was a really long time ago. But that was the amazing thing that I found out, is how narrow the margins are for hospitals. I would have thought that it wasn't. Of course, today it's become even more critical, with value-based care and making sure that we're delivering that. So I can really see how what you do at Dossier is super important to helping deliver kind of on that mandate. So you obviously came to the U.S. from somewhere else. I'll let you talk about where did you come to the U.S. from?
So I grew up in Norway and spent my whole life. I'm a mechanical engineer by background. When I was about to finish my studies or at the university, I met some other people and we shared interest in how to understand how we learn and how we learn what we actually can do. We shared some frustration that universities where we belonged at that time spent resources and emphasis on what exam you passed, what book you read, what class you finished, but it didn't really tell what you were capable of doing. And this was in the era of internet was pretty new. Actually, SaaS companies didn't exist. Talent management systems, as we know them today, they didn't really exist as well. I was lucky. My professor was the previous CEO of IBM Europe and Middle East. So we got a window into the emerging technology with learning management system, that kind of stuff. So we came from Norway. We came from this very long back. This was in the end of the .com in year 2000. So more 26 years since now. And Dossier was actually founded already at that point, to be able to create a system to capture what people really can do. So Dossier means the binder. You want to have the digital binder. And fast forward, we had different phases in Dossier we can come back to in this conversation. I tested the water with the US market a couple of times before we hit something which I think is the kind of the milestone which everyone is looking for, the product market fit, which I think we were very near to find in 2019 when I made the move with my family. So right now I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area with my wife, and I was about to say 4 kids. We moved here with 4 kids, but one already grew out of his bedroom and is now in college in Vancouver. So came from Oslo, Norway, studied in Trondheim, the Technical University, and now in the San Francisco Bay Area, enjoying the AI, the heart of the AI these days.
Yeah, it's I think it's a different world. You had talked, as we're recording this in early January. I'm actually headed to San Francisco next week for the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference, and it has changed so much. Even in the last year, I feel like everything is AI, right? Every company that's there, even if they've got a wearable or some type of medical solution, everything is tied to AI. So yeah, it's it's an interesting world that we live in. So Geir, when you said you had made kind of a couple of forays into the market, what was the first assumption that you had that turned out to be false about the market?
So to give you a little bit of context there, after we started Dossier, we had a longer period. We worked with making talent management systems. At some point, we got into healthcare, and we were given a great opportunity to work with Norwegian healthcare. There are 4 regional healthcare systems in Norway, and we have been very fortunate to be able to work with them, all of them, and the Ministry of Health through the Director of Health. And I will say we basically built this concept together. And I think this is important because that concept was built on where Norway as a nation wants healthcare to be. Right. Because there is a will from the top. We have some political drivers. We have some standards of health we want to meet, and they're always kind of is basically the annual letter coming with mandates to the industry, and it's followed by money. So that and if we kind of mirror that into how it is to be a vendor in Norway and many places in Europe as well. Our job is to help these organizations to execute on their mandate very strategically. So you think at a system, and I went to the US based on, of course, having that opportunity to work with the entire Norwegian healthcare system. We didn't have so much growth market around us. So we need to investigate other countries because, we want to make something scalable. We want to come to a place where the Norwegian healthcare doesn't need to pay every dollar or Norwegian krona that go into our investment of R&D. We want to spread that across more customers to have a more cost-efficient development. So we investigated the US market, and with this idea that, we know how to have a conversation with top people, how to basically strategically develop their healthcare system. And we approached Innovation Norway, which is a government-funded body out here in Silicon Valley. This was back in 2013. And we started to do some some introduction, and we got introduced to some healthcare systems. And we had great conversations. We had great case studies, and they basically could tell in this holistic view how we can help to improve healthcare. But those discussions, they always just faded off. There were no really uptake of our philosophy, to our surprise. I went back from that trip. We spent, my wife and I, we spent 6 weeks here in 2013 to basically learn how the healthcare system works and something about setting up a business, all of that. And one time I actually flew back to have a meeting with a larger healthcare system here in California. And we were meeting with corporate something HR, which was apparently the place where we should speak. And as I landed at SFO, so I came here solely for that single meeting, but we of course said we had multiple meetings to not make them feel that we're only coming for that specific meeting, but that was reality was we did come for that specific meeting. We got in a rental car and headed towards Sacramento. In the car, we got a text and they said, well, we have to reschedule, but we suggest we just make this a phone call. Okay. So I flew into San Francisco. This was from Norway to have this meeting, which ended up being a phone call. And I think that kind of started the process of learning that, well, there has to be something more. You cannot just plant a strategic idea. So I think we from there, we had to reset, and we had to really understand what is the value we are bringing, and what is the real buyer persona, and how is what makes a large organization, what triggers a purchase process or an investment decision. And I think that brought this kind of whole flash of everything that is different. Whereas and it goes back to the nature of the organization. Like the Norwegian healthcare system is driven by a mandate. They are told what to do, and they're followed in money. The US healthcare system is basically driven by they have to get to certain P&L or EBITDA requirement, otherwise they die. So you need to speak to that EBITDA or P&L proficiency or efficiency to be able to have a conversation with them. So you need to find some short-term ROIs as you go, and if you don't, there is very hard to find a way in. So going from that top level to understanding, well, we have to flip this around. We need to start speaking with people who owns the problem. Like, what are these short-term and tangible problems that we can take away, and we free up some money, and we can justify our existence. So I'm not sure if that's what you point to, but
I'm almost ready to just shut down the episode after that, because you did a tremendous job of laying out the conversation that we have with our clients almost on a daily basis. I mean, I want to probably maybe bring out a couple of things. It's funny because I was just talking with somebody from the Netherlands this morning, and the first words out of their mouth were, "Oh, we've had some great conversations, but nothing happened after them." Right. And so as I started digging into that, I found out that they fairly similar. They dealt with mostly public entities in the Netherlands, had been very successful because of mandates, because of a single payer system, and it tied into that. But they had not thought about, I always talk about the what's in it for me, right? So what's in it for, who you're calling on the US, and what their problem is, and exactly how they talk about that problem, and ultimately how it ties financially. And I think that's the biggest gap that we see a lot of times with our clients, is realizing, how does this tie to revenue? How does it tie to cost mitigation? And then how do you find that, that money? You had said that initially you were talking with HR professionals. Is that who you ended up with, or how did you shift, or who did you shift to?
So it's a long story from there, because it wasn't, well, in Afterhind, we could probably figure out this right away, and
Right.
kind of adapt, fail fast and all of that.
Right.
A combination of different factors made it not that easy. We had a business to take care of. We had limited bandwidth
Right.
and extra or excess money that we could throw into more systematic kind of approach of US market entry. So we continued to entertain the market in terms of going to conferences. So we continued going to conferences, observing how other companies were working. We got some good mentors from the Nordic Innovation House in Palo Alto, or like the Innovation Norway, provided us with some introductions here and there. And through those introductions, I got introduced to Roger, who's our first person here in the US, who's been working with me since 2017, I think. And he was in another healthcare company at that point, and so but they were not that company was not as successful to close their Series B as they hoped to. So there were some kind of movements around, and we started to investigate. Well, are we able to find the pilot? And I hate the word pilot. I like it. It's really not what we wanted. Like we wanted a big fish or the whale, not a small pilot. But anyway, we were like, okay, we never kind of get hold on that big thing with the HR, which we used to speak to in Norway and European countries. So like we tried to figure out like who can we go in with, and we came in through the chief innovation officer at the local hospital here in the Bay Area. And the chief innovation officer, I think he knew Roger. So like there was some sort of trust there in the beginning. But he also brought us to their chief nursing officer. And the chief nursing officer understood how this could change, or how we could help. But she wasn't really ready to put her whole nursing department onto our testing. So she pointed us to a inpatient pharmacy department, which is a small department. I think there were 20 people at that point. But anyway, for us, the place we could start. The funny thing was, when we started to work with the pharmacy department and the chief, the director of pharmacy, his name was Geir Arnhoff. He was at the end of his career, and he said, he gave us a chance, and he had all his paper binders and said like, well, if we can digitize this, and that was basically what we could do. We could digitize this into dashboards and apps, and so make his workflow a little bit smoother. And coincidentally, when we were working with that, they had an unannounced survey from Joint Commission. And for those who don't know U.S. healthcare system in detail, for a hospital or a healthcare system to be eligible to get paid from Medicare or Medicaid, and also an insurance company, you need to have a surveyor, similar to an auditor and like financial auditor. Just a surveyor basically sign off on your quality standards. So Joint Commission is the most frequent surveyor, and they had an unannounced visit to do some checkups on the compliance. And this unannounced visit happens on a cycle, which is normally 3 years in every department. And during our visit out there, where we were starting to work to digitize, the auditor came in, and everyone freaked out. like joint commissions in the building, which is a phrase in the US hospital, because then everything has to be in shape. You need to be able to show evidence for this and that. One of those things are the training and the training records. And we were able to show our training records to the Joint Commission surveyor, and they were really satisfied. So, and Gary Horn, the director of pharmacy, he was satisfied because like this will take him a couple of weeks to pull together only for the 20 people. So this was a very long answer to your question, but we ended up basically narrow down on what I call, this is kind of our moment of identifying the product market fit or the problem. That like, what is the real problem that someone struggle with and has some severe consequences if they're not able to solve it, but we can solve it in a better way, or we can solve a problem that wasn't solvable before. So this was something that cost a whole lot of money and time and potential penalties. But now there was a solution, and we basically understood, well, there is a place where we can find the person with the problem and the money, and that is the director of a unit when they have a joint commission surveyor to come in. And that's not the HR. The HR will benefit from the result. When we get everything together, we get like all the data and we can give them reports back on the corporate level. But that's more downstream from solving that first problem.
You make a lot. I love the story because that's what helps really make things clear to people, I think, is when you can tell a story. But it's something that we see a lot, with our clients, is sometimes who you think the right person is they might be a benefit. They might benefit like HR did, but the person that has the actual problem, and I always say that will write the check to fix that problem, that's the person you've got to find, right? Because other people might be around it, it might impact them, but you want to have the person that writes the check. And you talked a little bit about what we like to call triggers, or what are the things that cause people to go, okay, I really need to fix this problem. And of course, you found that it was the Joint Commission surveys that are coming in. Of course, that's anybody in the U.S. healthcare system, if you can tie it to making that process less painful, they will listen, right? Because because it is painful, number one, but number two, if they don't get it right, they don't get paid, and that is that's obviously a key. Anything that ties to revenue is super important to hospitals. You talked a little bit about pilots and kind of how you don't like that, but I think you would say that part of proving value when you're working, and I'll say even broadly with the healthcare market in the U.S., is some element of a pilot. We always talk to our clients and say, you want to do paid pilots, but I'm curious as to maybe if you could share, how did you put together, I'll call it a pilot system that delivered value, but didn't upset your, I say maybe your cost of acquisition, because I see a lot of people spending a lot of money on pilots and not really getting any return on that. But how did you work through that with Dossier and kind of finding that mix?
Yeah. It sounds easy, but it's not always easy because you have very little leverage when you're in that situation. Right. You're basically begging for a customer. So like it's not the opposite way. Yeah. Even the problem is very present. There's a big risk, and healthcare is very risk averse, and we like them to be risk averse. So yes. So that's the issue. I think in our case, as soon as we got to a place where, there is an acceptance, they want to try our product to solve this problem, then it was about scoping. So say, first to have some description of like the baseline, what is status now? And I think we did that to a certain degree. We actually used like stopwatch and monitor how much time you spend today and all of that.
Okay.
I think the more you can have a metric system in place as soon as possible and present that, and we can all agree on, well, the pilot is successful if we're able to move this metric from A to B.
Right.
So today, this is the workflow or the process, and you spend this much time or it costs so much money. If you can get it to this timeline and this cost, then we call it success.
Right.
So I think that's very important. And then next is to give it some time and say, well, if that happens, then we have a contract.
Right.
So, well, you try this, we take the risk, but if it works, so if you meet the metrics, then you pay. I think the payment has to be very small. At least it had to be in our case. Like our
Right.
first customer paid very little. It's more almost symbolic that we have a contract piece of paper. We can write an invoice, which is important because you become a vendor in their system. So I think the metrics and agreement on them, the time frame, and almost like the commitment at the end on meeting those metrics. And the metrics doesn't need to be hard. Some of the metrics we used in the beginning was simply that we were able to digitize paper into our system. That was one of the metrics. So we said, like, if we're able to digitize what you have on paper and replicate it on a digital surface, that's one metric. We can check the box.
Right.
So it needs to be something that is very tangible, measurable, and achievable. And I don't remember exactly, but I think we got $2,000 annually on that contract after.
No, I so you make a lot of really good points there. I think when people think, because I would say this is true whether you're in healthcare or really any type of market. You know, we do some work in financial services and insurance, doing a lot of work with AI companies now, and everybody, you've got to go with a pilot. I mean, because companies are risk averse. I think, unfortunately, with the companies we deal with, or the markets that we deal with, are very conservative. And you want them to be conservative. Same way with healthcare and financials. You don't want them to be wild and spending money everywhere. But you've got to be able to prove that value. But as a company, you really highlighted, okay, you want to be very clear about what the scope is, what the deliverable is, right? What is it? What's the metric that we're delivering on? Have some element of cost associated with that, because you want to become a vendor, but you also want them to have spent something. It doesn't have to be a huge amount. It doesn't have to be a couple $100,000, but it needs to be something so that the people on the other side of the transaction are committed to it, because there's being money spent. And then you want to tie that success in that proof of concept or proof of value to signing up as a contract. And we do a lot of work a lot of times with our customers on how do you bridge that pricing and how do you break that down? And there's a number of different ways that we see people do that. But I'd love to hear, because you literally said almost everything that we say to our customers when we're talking about pilots, because that's one of the big things that I think we see people struggling with, because they want to show up and get the big contract, which that can happen. Well, if you look at Instagram, that happens all the time, right? People show up and they get the $1 million contract, right? But in reality, you're doing a couple of pilots, with different and that's how you get to success. And then eventually, that pilot sometimes goes away, but you're still having to prove value in some way. And I would imagine even today, as you're bringing new clients on, you're having to prove value. May not be the way you did initially, but be curious to hear today, fast forwarding, how do you prove value to your clients today?
Yeah, I think there are multiple steps between having that first. So for us, that basically was, as soon as we understood the mechanism in that first, and this is the beauty of the US market and the US economy, that everything is big. So even if if your solution is addressing a small problem in a small niche in the market, you can even scale that.
Right.
So we were able to scale around the inpatient pharmacy first, and a little bit, or not just a little bit, very much due to the pandemic as well.
Right.
So I think we were helped, we were disciplined by the pandemic, that it was hard to get in more doors. So we had to
Right.
stick with the doors we knew how to open. And later we did land expand
Right.
to get to larger, like the works in this department, can we move on to the next department? And at some point you get into a more enterprise picture. And the experience is, at least on our side, is that in all of these phases, you need logos, you need references. So, what's the difference selling to the pilot and selling today? Or at some point, the more you can get blue chip logos or something which is referenceable, getting case studies, because the larger you go, the more evidence you want to have. And hospitals in general, they like to see other hospitals have tested before themselves. And even better, they want to see a department in their own organization having tested, or both. So today we see both. And what happened in our case was, as we grew this story, we developed a category. So we ended up, like, when we went to trade shows 5 years ago and spoke about competency management for healthcare, we had to explain it. Okay, this is why, this is the problem, this is all that. And now there has been competitor coming after us, and now there is a buzz around. We have become a category, and there is a pickup, and there is a knowledge on the enterprise level. So today we can actually sell on the enterprise level, because now there is a concept, and there is a validated concept that it makes sense for hospitals to digitize these processes. And then someone at the enterprise level wants to take control on that, because they have seen other hospitals doing it. But you need to, in our case, we had to build that category. So I think there is a tipping point before or after you are in the category. And we spent a couple of years to establish the category. It costs a lot of money, because you need to do marketing, you need to build references, you need to tell the story, and you need to have quite a bit of luck. You need to hit something which is regarded as very important at the time, because hospitals, they have 100 problems, if not thousands, but they only have bandwidth to address this many problems. And that's the same thing in Norway as in the US. There is almost like these slots of, think about this like a runway on the airport. You can only take off so many planes, because everything needs all the apparatus around to be able to take off. And you can only make so many takeoff in a year. And the same with projects. So you need to be on that level of urgency. And so even if the ROI is fantastic, you may not be prioritized, because something else, which may be regulatory, or maybe cybersecurity, or other things that may hit in and take priority.
That's a really good point. I was having a conversation yesterday with a client, and we were talking about how we're not going to sell somebody on, buying our product, and that, they will buy it and then go find a problem to solve with it. We've got to find that problem that is urgent, that they will, write a check for here in the next 12 to 18 months, and tie into that. So I think that's when you think about market research, and that's what takes a lot of time, right? Because you're kind of iterating, and then sometimes that problem shifts, right? I mean, as you adapt as a company, that problem could look a little bit different in how you solve it. That's the whole thing with marketing, right? We want to make sure that we're tying into, that problem and making very clear how we solve that, and how we do it in a cost-effective manner. So if you were today, advising yourself 10 years ago, what would be the 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you would give to yourself, as to, that would maybe cut down some of the pain that you had, you've gone through? And I'm not saying it's any journey that you take is worth it, right? But if you could advise your younger self, what would you advise? What 2 or 3 things would you advise?
To make a comparison, or like an analogy, when my wife and we got our first kid, my cousin, she was a few years older than me, and they already had 2 kids. She told us, "You probably get a whole lot of advices from other parents. I give you one advice: don't listen to any of them." And I think there is something in that, because it's very important to understand your context. So I will probably we didn't understand our context fully. We anticipated the US context to be very similar to the Norwegian context. So we didn't understand it. That's one thing. That could also lead you to not try, and to hesitation, which I think is very bad. So you should not use that as an excuse. You should just be very context aware. And I think if there is one advice I could give to myself, that will be make sure you understand the problem. Like, what is the problem you solve, and who do you solve the problem for? And very cynically, does that person have money? Because if that person doesn't have access to funds, you are wasting your time in the beginning. Later on, it may be very important. And for us, when we ended up addressing the Joint Commission problem, it's not a problem we really want to address. Because it's a regulatory thing, it doesn't really bring value. It's very second order or third order from value. So we really want to bring more value in terms of our end users having a better experience and learning more efficient. That's downstream, or like the regulatory is actually downstream from what we want to do. But like understanding the problem, what the problem really is, and be aware of context. Probably my answer to those questions.
Yeah, all great points. I think the first thing that you were talking about is, and I say I have 4 kids as well. I think we talked about that. I have 3 boys and a daughter, and I think one of the things I've learned in working with my boys, who I actually, they are involved in my businesses, which is great. I love that. Love to be able to work with them, but I would tell them things a lot of times, and I would go, well, maybe you shouldn't do that. They would not listen until they actually experienced it themselves, right? And I'm sure you've seen that with your kids. And I think it's important in business. So it's important to kind of take the journey and to take some of the lumps and the failure, and that helps you understand context. And then I think your point about understanding the problem intimately, who has it, and if they'll write a check. I mean, those 3 things, I think if somebody said, what are the 3 pieces of advice I'd give anybody starting a business, is those 3 things. Because if you don't understand those, you don't really have a business, right? You might have a hobby, you might have something that you're going to pour a lot of money into, but if you're not solving a problem for somebody who will write a check to solve that problem, you probably don't have a business. And that's I think that's just such great advice. And I think it's probably a great place for us to kind of land the episode here, because I think those are some pearls of wisdom that I think our founders and co-founders and revenue leaders that listen to this podcast can take as they start to think about their 2026 and strategy beyond. So, Geir, anything else that you would add, to a founder that is considering the U.S. market? Anything else that you would just say, hey, you really should do this? Or maybe we'll say, maybe one thing that you really shouldn't do and one thing that you really should do, since we are on the Seriously Don't Do That podcast.
Well, I think my first, you should do, you should definitely try. So because working in the US is an enrichment that I would never be without. There are so many clever people, and there are so much energy, and things are happening because of the P&L structure. It's more predictable in a sense.
Right.
And it's actually easier to, and if it doesn't work here, it may work there. So it gives you more opportunity, and it gives you an opportunity to test different angles. So like if you are considering, you should definitely do it. You should be very careful with spending money until you have this product market fit. We are talking about like who is having the money, who can write that check, because then you don't have the idea, or you don't have certainty of the full cycle. And you will never have. There is a risk associated. There is a reason why we have venture capital and people make bets on companies, because you don't know before you know. And at that point, well, you are successful. And you don't need the money. So you need to spend your money wisely. Don't spend it, but spend it very wisely, and think about, are we really solving a problem that is worth money?
So I think that's a great place to end up, where you said, yes, go out there and try. I think so many people are afraid to try, and there's a lot of room in this market for failure, right? Or for iteration. But, your point about don't, double and triple down until you know that you've got product market fit. And I think that's just great advice. Well, Geir, for folks that have listened to us today and got to meet you, what's the best place for them to connect with you?
LinkedIn. I try to answer when there are things on LinkedIn. If I, for some reason, don't answer, don't hesitate to ping me another time. I think that's probably the easiest place to find me.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure that we provide the link if we're not on the LinkedIn platform. Of course, if you are on LinkedIn, that'll be right down in our show notes. You can do that. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us, Geir. This has been a great conversation. I'm sure we're going to get lots of great comments. And I will look forward to seeing you in person here in a week. But I wanted to thank you for joining the Seriously Don't Do That podcast. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And we'll look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Thank you.